You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
Shalom. This is Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and I want to welcome you to this week's SLA Insight. I'm continuing to talk about the issue of output in language acquisition. In the last couple episodes, I talked about three mental processes that are involved in producing output. The first is access, and this was presented in episode number 36, inadvertently posted out of order. So if you want to go back to episode 36, you can look at access and how you have to access the words or remember them that you want to use and what they mean. The second process is monitoring. That's making sure that your utterance is grammatically correct and socially appropriate. You're saying the right thing at the right time. And then the third strategy or group of strategies are production strategies. That these allow you to string together words and phrases into meaningful, coherent communication. So with that, in this episode, I want to move us on to what's known as the output hypothesis, put forth by Merrill Swain. Now, this is intended to be somewhat compatible with the input hypothesis by Creation, and we talked a bit about the input hypothesis in discussing input. Now, with input, we talked about how input is absolutely essential for language acquisition. You have to have input, and it's specifically comprehensible input, in order to begin the acquisition process. The output comes a little bit later in the process and plays a different role in acquisition. So Merrill Swain, in bringing this together, noticed that her students did not receive native-like proficiency in immersion classroom settings where they're getting plenty of input and comprehensible input. And so she suggested that perhaps input is necessary, but it's not sufficient. And so she thought that perhaps the limited gains in second language development came due to a lack of L2 or second language output, because output pushes the learner to analyze the L2 grammar at a depth that is not necessary when receiving input. So as Swain notes, quote, learners can fake it, so to speak, in comprehension, but they cannot do so in the same way in production, end quote. And Rod Ellis, another SLA theorist, further explains that production requires learners to process syntactically. They have to pay some attention to form in order to produce output. And so out of these observations, Merrill Swain developed the output hypothesis. Now, this hypothesis claims that, quote, the act of producing language, speaking or writing, constitutes under certain circumstances part of the process of second language learning, end quote. Now notice here the qualifications. It's not as full-blown as the input hypothesis that says, yes, absolutely, you have to have input to acquire the language. It's suggesting that under certain circumstances, part of the process of acquisition is going to be output, and that output does play a role in developing proficiency in the process of language acquisition. Now, since her original formulation of the output hypothesis, there's been further research and discussion that have helped to kind of fill in the details and suggest that, yes, output and production can contribute to acquisition and thus proficiency. Now, there's some ways that it does that. It can do so directly, and it can do so indirectly. It has a number of roles in filling in what may be lacking from comprehensible input on its own. So in the next week's episode, I'm going to give you an overview of how output contributes to language acquisition and the different roles that it plays in promoting acquisition and proficiency in language development. So I hope you can join me for that episode. In the meantime, have a great week.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.